Hello and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. This time I'm going to be covering a whole bunch of stuff about PvP, some of the changes they're making, and actually a completely new item level system, which is different. It's definitely very different. I think we'll have to see how it plays out. But anyway, this is based off a recent WoW source, which is like a little chat, sit-down interview thingy that they do with Morgan Webb and a few developers. This time it was Chris Zerhoot, who is the class designer, Brian Halinka, who is the PvP badass guy, and then Ian Hazakostas, who is one of the lead system designers. Or maybe the lead system designer, I'd imagine. Anyway, so what has happened in the game? Well, the first thing they mentioned wasn't PvP, but they did say that they have changed up Frostfire Ridge and Shadowmoon Valley quite a bit since the original BlizzCon experience, and some of these revamps have actually delayed some of the early public alpha and beta processes. That was kind of interesting to hear. Basically, they said that a few elements of it just weren't living up to their expectations. I'd assume that they kind of made those zones first, and then they just kept on making new zones, and by the time they had finished whatever the end zones of Draenor were, they looked back at the first two and thought, we can do them better. So hopefully that's turned out well. Alright, let's get into the meat of the video and talk about PvP. So the very first thing that they talked about was actually crowd control. Basically, Halinka said that it was the one of the largest PvP problems in Mists of Pandaria. Basically what they've done in Warlords is make diminishing returns more sensible. So diminishing returns, by the way, that's just for a certain window of time. Each subsequent crowd control that you get will suffer a 50% diminishing return for its duration, until you get to a period where you've been CC'd so much in that one diminishing return category that you're actually immune to them for a certain amount of time. So that's why every time you get feared, the fear will last for, less and less and less and less until you're just immune to fear for a while. So they've done that, and then they've also toned down the base duration of quite a lot of the CCs. And then, of course, they also said that it's very important that CCs are there because they allow you to create windows of opportunity in gameplay by, say, like taking out the enemy healer for a little bit, pruning someone off your own healer, various things like that. Then another thing that they've done is that they have consolidated diminishing returns into 5 categories, down from 13, which will make things a lot more understandable, and every single spell will fall into a diminishing return, I'm pretty sure anyway. The example they gave was Cyclone. It actually used to just not have a diminishing return on it that stacked with anything else, so Cyclone is now, stack with other DRs, which totally makes sense. Now, that's the crowd control done. Let's talk about gear. So they said that gear has been a really large problem in Mists. Basically, they want a little bit more crossover with gear between PvP and PvE, but they definitely want gear to be a little bit specialized. So PvE gear is absolutely the best in PvE, and PvP gear is absolutely the best in PvP. Though Halinka did say that people tend to tunnel vision into either, PvP or PvE, they don't really do a lot of crossover sometimes, and what Blizzard would prefer is that you're able to do both but then can specialize, and hopefully this kind of new balancing of item levels should allow for that. Also, they said that PvP suffered in outdoor content, that's PvP gear, during Mists of Pandaria because of its comparatively lower item level. Which was definitely true, and I think something a lot of players felt and got a little bit aggravated over. Anyway, so now for the new PvP gear system. This is very, very different. Basically, some bits of gear, I guess PvP gear, will have a second item level, and this item level will activate when you're in PvP. So this will work whether, it's a player ganking you in the open world, or you're in Ashran or an arena. Basically, if you are fighting another player, then your gear's PvP item level will activate. So they think that this bridges a nice gap between things, because it means that PvP gear is still going to be the best in PvP, but it can have a pretty decent item level, just, normally, so that when it comes to just being in the open world, fighting, a few mobs or something like that, you're not as, sort of weak as you were in maybe some parts of Pandaria. It's an interesting system, actually. The example that they showed was a 660 item level PvP chest that, when you are in PvP, would have an effective item level of 690. And by the way, if you don't know how the item levels work, basically the amount of stats that a piece of gear can get is based off its item level. So if the item level goes up by 30, then the actual numbers of the stats will comparatively go up a little bit as well, and that's how that's all going to balance out. And it seems like it's going to be this system instead of them doing PvP power and resilience and all those things, which I guess were not particularly fun to some people. So yeah, interesting system. Do let me know what you think about it. It's definitely interesting. That's what I can say. This is really one that's just going to have to be tested a hell of a lot. Alrighty, so next they talked about Ashran. Basically, it's new, it's non-instant, and what they really wanted to do was make a full persistent battle, which is something that they had never really done before. Even Wintergrasp and Tol Barad were basically just large battlegrounds, so they want this to be a little bit more of a PvP playground, kind of like a PvP Timeless Isle, though I'm not too sure that that description is going to have the best connotations with players. So maybe not the best thing to go around saying if you are a Blizzard employee. Anyway, what they want is for people to be able to go to Ashran, fight in the main fight, maybe do some side objectives, explore, do some quests, various other things, but have all of this be tied into the main battle in a way that progresses both the battle and their character. Now, the theme of Ashran itself is that it will be like an ancient ogre island that the Alliance and Horde have both landed on, so it's a new savage land, as we have came to expect. They also showed a bit of a work-in-progress map, which gives you a rough outline of how things will be laid out, and then some of the various staging areas and fortresses and side objectives, and that kind of thing. It looks interesting, actually, and one thing that they're going to have in this is these like staging areas where PvP players can basically just hang out. You know, there'll be vendors there. Maybe there'll be some things like a tavern, and you know, the general like repair vendors and things that people find useful. That's really cool, actually, because if you have a PvP character and you just park him at Ashran, well, that character is going to have access to a lot of the basics that it will need just to function from day to day, and it means that if you want to hop in and do 10 minutes of quick PvP, you can do that. You don't have to fly over to Ashran because it only makes sense to log off at the Vale because that's a central location. So that's a pretty cool way of doing things, actually. So, yeah, I like that. Now, they also are going to have some other things. There'll be large fortresses on the map which are full of NPCs, and the NPCs will be actively fighting. And the main battle of Ashran actually takes place on this big, like, main road thingy. And it almost seems like a little bit of a tug of war, perhaps with a little bit of inspiration from the lane-based gameplay of MOBAs or hero brawlers or whatever the hell you want to call them. So, you know, Dota, LoL, that kind of thing. I think that's a good way to do it, because it's very visceral. If they really truly make that a large battle with lots of NPCs and lots of players, and it really does feel like a tug of war, then it's going to feel like a large-scale battle, and when people actually progress through it, it will feel good, because you'll know that if over a 10-minute period your side is able to gain 500 meters or 200 meters or whatever, you really will know that, yeah, we've moved forward, we are now closer to their tower or their base or whatever. So that's definitely a very good way to do it, and it's interesting how they've basically just concentrated the main fight in some key objectives and then the main road. That's kind of, well, I think that's good in a way, because World vs. World in some other games, like say Guild Wars 2, has basically just been a whole bunch of zergs of players running around each other, capturing places, moving on, capturing places, moving on. In this system, that sort of pitfall probably won't be an issue, which I think really is quite a good thing. So overall, very nice, can't wait to see Ashran, and I'm sure my PvP warrior will have a hell of a good time there. Now, they said one or two more things about PvP testing. Basically, they're going to have a separate level 100 PvP realm on the beta and alpha servers, so this will allow them to test PvP from the get-go. Traditionally, in the beta, it would start off with a level cap of, let's just say, 92, and then they'd slowly increase that as more content was made to be tested. But now, because you'll just be able to jump into this level 100 PvP realm, they will be able to start PvP balance testing and design passes and all those things from the very start, or at least near the start of the beta process, which is very good actually. They're also going to be doing a similar thing with raiding, where they might actually scale up people's levels in order to test out raids, because if you think about it, Blizzard, just say they want to test out a certain mechanic. Well, it doesn't matter if you're level 100 or not. If they can give you the stats and throw you in there, then it provides them with valuable testing information, so definitely worth it. And then finally, they said that skirmishes are coming back, and they're going to try to match healers and DPS. That was just one little tidbit that I heard, which is very good. Actually, extremely important when you're maybe in a 2v2 or something like that. And then they also said that at the end of a skirmish match, which is basically, by the way, just a like a quick little random queue, well, it can be a random queue, like PvP arena styled thingy. It's basically just a reintroduction of the old skirmish system, but adding a bit of a reward to it. So at the end you can get maybe a piece of battleground gear, maybe a loot bag, or on some very rare occasions a conquest piece. They think that this will help a lot of people get into arenas, and then also just from a loot perspective, I like how you're going to be able to get gear from it. That will be a little bit less deterministic, and hopefully should just spice things up a little bit in terms of how you get PvP gear. Alright, so next, there was a little bit of a Q&A. So, first of all, Battleground blacklisting. They said that it fulfilled its intent, and that while some players think that it contributes to long queue times, that's not actually the problem, because blacklisting is only used by around 20% of people. The actual problem is faction balance, and basically more Horde players queue for PvP than Alliance in some regions, and that's what's causing a lot of just a problem. And they are currently looking into options, but don't have an announcement yet, though Helinka did say that some of them are quite promising. So that'll definitely be interesting. Now, another thing that they said is that threat regeneration has changed over time, and that basically back in Vanilla and the Burning Crusade, people, like DPS players, would really have to watch their threat and that kind of thing. And they realized that this threat-based gameplay for DPS was kind of hard to do, because first of all, it was very just hard to communicate that in terms of the game's default UI, and then also it would force gameplay where you would just have to stop attacking. That's not your job as a DPS. You want to attack harder, not stop. So because of that, they sort of just shifted things, so the threat didn't matter, and the tanking was not really about threat anymore, but was about surviving. And they like the fantasy of you're being attacked by a dragon, so you raise your shield and you do badass things, so you don't get eaten by it. I think that actually makes sense, and from a gameplay perspective, I think that overall it's probably for the best, though there were some fun things that happened in the old system. Alright, so then moving on, they said that they're going to ensure the dungeons play out a little bit better in terms of other people and just the general learning process of the game. And basically, heroic dungeons are going to have a proving ground gate, which means that you actually have to complete a certain level of proving ground before you can get in there. And that should try to gate off some people. And then Chris Erhout at the very end just popped in and said that in a future patch that isn't 6.0, they're planning on doing an overhaul to the proving grounds so that they teach people in a more effective manner than they currently do. So hopefully they would offer suggestions, maybe tell you if there's a certain ability that you really should be using that you're not, and various things like that. Honestly, I think it's a pity that's not going to be there in 6.0, because the whole big clamour for doing loads of doing loads of dungeons is going to be a 6.0 thing. Obviously, it's at the very start of the expansion when you run the most dungeons, so it would have been nice if that feature made it in for the very beginning. But I guess that's just not going to happen. Anyway, so the next thing they talked about was the button bloat removal. Basically, they just said they wanted to remove some redundant abilities or spells that were maybe similar to other ones with only a minor difference. Examples of those were Drain Soul and Drain Life, or then maybe for the Druids, Mangle and Shred. Fair enough in my opinion, and it should be for the better of the game. I'm a staunch believer, at least in terms of the concept, that the button removal is a good thing for the game on the whole, and one of the nice things that people don't really sort of take into account is that it will allow people, or not people, it will allow Blizzard in future expansions to have room to add some new cool abilities. Right now they can't do that because it's just getting to the point where it's too damn much, so at least it gives them a bit more leeway. Anyway, so the next thing that they showed off was some amazing animations from the level 100 mage talents. I'll throw in some footage there in the background. But damn! Oh, damn, it looks so good. So I hope that we'll get similarly cool animations for other classes, though I can't really see a hunter ability getting something that badass. Anyway, they also said that they are very aware of visual clutter, and they're going to be toning down visuals from your allied players, though of course in PvP they're going to show everything because, you know, essential information is provided to you when you see the exact spell effects that are coming off people. And then finally they said that for class balancing in PvE, basically they just do it off live server numbers, and if a class is not really being played a great deal, then instead of making that class better in terms of damage numbers, they'd rather just make it more fun and awesome. So the example that they gave was that rogues were not really being played enough, and they thought that one or two elements of the rogue could be more fun. So one of the things that they did was they made it so that you could go in stealth at full speed. and apparently that's something that rogues appreciated and enjoyed. I couldn't tell you personally because I can't play rogues. I don't know what it is. I just don't. They don't click with me. But anyway, that's basically it for this and all the PvP news. I think the PvP news really is great, actually. A lot of that stuff sounds really good, and I cannot wait for Ashran. I just want to get in there and test the hell out of it. And as for the whole item level system, well, I guess it does cut down on the need for some of those superfluous stats that only apply to PvP. And once you explain this item level system to people, they're going to understand it, and it will make a lot of sense. So they are clear advantages. And yeah, I guess it just comes down to the question of can Blizzard make sure that the item levels they choose are the correct ones in terms of balance? They're going to get so much information during the testing process that I can't see them making a mistake in terms of that. So hopefully it's all going to work out pretty well. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you